All right, New Year's may have been a few days ago, but I think we all needed just an extra bit of time to celebrate the end of 2020. Now, before anyone comments about social distancing and why nobody's wearing a mask, that video was, I don't know, 2006? Whatever. Sometime in the past when I went to Prague. It was done on a small Kodak point and shoot, and it was the only way I could get video at the time, which is why it looks so bad. Because 640 by 480, whopping 13 frames a second, that's the best I could do. Even the Nikon D70S I had at the time couldn't do that. Couldn't do video, period. But yet today, we have things like this ZV-1 from Sony that can do good 4K video. And even the Nikon Z6 II I'm using to film this can, one day, maybe, shoot 12-bit raw 4K video. It's nearly 500 times the data in each frame, 1,000 times more data in each second than we could do 14 years ago. It's amazing how far cameras have come. And since reflecting on the past is kind of part of what New Year's is about, I also have this. It's the GoPro Hero 3 Plus. It's actually the same one I used in my cross-country motorcycle trip a few years back. And it just so happens that a few months ago, GoPro came out with this Hero 9. Yes, it's been heavily reviewed, but is it really better? Sure, on paper it's impressive, but all the camera specs you see, well, that's just hype meant to sell cameras. It's perfect in the lab, but this isn't one. I'm not a color scientist or anything like that. I don't care which processor is in it. All I care about is, did I get the shot? So now, instead of boring you with all the technical differences between these two, let's just put them side by side, identical settings, and see the real difference. So this is 4K. Yes, the Hero 3 Plus can do 4K video. Kind of. You notice how it's very, very choppy? Because, well, like that Kodak I mentioned earlier, it's doing less than 24 frames a second. In this case, we're at 15. The Hero 9, on the other hand, is at 60. Yeah, I can't really do identical settings on both cameras, but I can get them as close as possible. Still, other than the frame rate, this isn't bad footage. Sure, the color might be a little on the green side, and the 9 has a little bit more contrast and maybe looks a little sharper, but that's nothing that can't be fixed in post. Still, this really isn't a contest. I mean, the frame rate alone makes this unusable, but good on GoPro for trying. Remember that when this came out, there was no 4K TVs or monitors or anything like that, which means this was actually quite a bit of forward thinking on GoPro's part. Good for them for being innovative. There. So I'm curious how that's going to look, because I saw the cameras bobbling around all over on top of the hood. But either way, that one's done. Let's see what's next. This is 2.7K footage, and at 30 frames a second, it's probably the highest usable footage that 3 Plus can do. Although again, the Hero 9 is doing 4 times that frame rate at 120 frames per second. Again, you can see a bit of a difference between the colors, and again, the 9 is sharper, but the exposure between the two is the same. And that's pretty impressive considering we're shooting straight into the sun, which is pretty challenging to compensate for. And when you look at the mountains in the distance, you can actually make out the same level of detail on them both. You can still see the different coloring in the different rock layers, and you can still see the valleys and nooks and everything like that. Now, honestly, I'd say I would expect to see more difference between these two. All right, now we come to the standard, the one that's apples to apples, the same between both cameras. 1080p, 60 frames a second. All right, apparently I'm an idiot, and I didn't actually hit this record button. So I had to go back out to get this bit. And it's a good thing I did, because this is probably the most well-matched settings between these two cameras. Not only are they at the same 1080p and 60 frames a second, they're both in the SuperView format, which it uses the full sensor and squishes it down to the 16:9 frame you see here. and both cameras perform mediocre. The highlights are clipped on both, and you have the same color differences as before, which makes the 9 look a little bit more natural, but Las Vegas isn't really a natural place anyway, so in this case it's kind of subjective as to which is best. But it does look like there's a little bit more glow from the highlights in the 9, and maybe a little bit more star flare on the streetlights, but that's probably just due to the 9's lens cover, which the 3 Plus doesn't have. Still, this is not an easy environment, and with the years of improvement between these two cameras, again, I'd expect more difference, at least on the image side. When it comes to ease of use, however, it's night and day. And that's the real difference between these two cameras. Where this fails at is usability. It's easy to miss the buttons, the menu is clunky to use, unless you paid extra for the little LCD screen add-on. You can't compose your shots, so you end up with a lot of bad footage. But it was all standard stuff back then, and it's only when you have something newer to compare it to that you miss it. As it is, it works well. Sure, the 9 looks better, but this thing's 7 years old, and yet it still holds up surprisingly well. So what does that mean? Well, as we go into the new year, making resolutions and hoping for change, don't be afraid to keep what works. I won't. All right, so I think that's it for this video. It's 2021. You guys know what to do. This isn't your first YouTube video. So, till next time.